In this video, we're going to assess the average value of a function. So if you're finding averages of just anything, all right, say we're trying to find the averages of your scores on a test. So you scored a 95, an 85, a 70, a 90. All right, how do you figure out the average of your scores? What you do is you add up your scores and you divide by the number of scores. All right, so let's just quickly do that. 95 plus 85 plus 70 plus 90. All right, divided by 4, you get 85. All right, so you did well on 2 tests, but you did not really badly, but you didn't do as well as another one, and your average comes out to an 85. All right, so you all know how to do an average like that. All right, so what are we talking about when we're doing the average value of a function? To calculate an average, you add up the values and divide by the number of values. How do you do this for a function? I literally just said that. All right, so remember the integral symbol, this elongated S, represents area, but it also is the limit of sigma, which was adding up a bunch of stuff. So this thing also represents you're adding up a bunch of stuff. So the integral is actually the adding part of our average. By doing an integral, you're adding up an infinite number of rectangles. All right, and that's just like you're finding the top part of your average. And then how do you find the bottom, which you're dividing by? Well, if I'm trying to find the average from A to B, I have B minus A stuff. Like the distance from A to B is how much stuff I have. This is the adding up part. All right, so you're adding, you're dividing by the amount, and that gives you the average. All right, now we're just doing in a calculus setting. The adding up part's really weird because you have this area, all right, but everything else just makes sense in terms of the average of an expression. And so how do I find the average value of y equals x squared from 1 to 4? My formula, 1 over b minus a, just kind of the distance that you're covering, and the area, we're just adding up all the values in that section. And that's the whole thing. And then from there, this kind of 1/3 at the front is just going to stick around, and we just have to figure out what is the integral of this. All right, again, the 1/3 is just going to stay. Take the antiderivative and evaluate it from 1 to 4. The 1/3 stays. All of this is plugging in 4 first, minus plugging in 1 second. The 1/3 is just going to stay there the whole time. And 64 thirds minus 1/3 is 63 thirds. Final answer is 7. So on average, y equals x squared is a value of 7. Of course, like at 2, it's only 4, but then at 4, it's 16. All right, in the middle is exactly 7. I find the average value of this function from 0 to 1. So the first thing is my kind of amount of things is just the distance that I'm covering. Integral from 0 to 1, 3x squared plus 2x. All right, this one's lucky because this part here is just 1, so really it's the same as just finding this, finding this integral. So we take the antiderivative, better from 0 to 1, plug in 1, subtract when I plug in 0, that's 2. All right, so the average value of this function is 2. All right, just from 0 to 1, as soon as I go from 0 to 2, that average value is going to change because I have more function values to consider. So here's one for you to try on your own. I find the average value of this function from 2 to 6. I'll show you the answer in 3, 2, 1. All right, so the first part, pretty straightforward. Plugging in the formula, b is 6, a is 2. So the distance we're covering is 4. So we're going to divide by 1/4. And then we're adding up the area. We're doing the integral from 2 to 6 of 4x minus 2. And we do our antiderivatives, plug in 6 and 2. And again, this 1/4, I would just kind of keep at the front the whole time until you get your answer, final answer for your area, and then do the division at the end. Because if you try to like put this 1/4 in here, chances are you forget to distribute somewhere. It's just easier to keep the 1/4 there until the kind of very last step. Right. So the summary of this lesson, literally just know this formula. All right, the basic idea is you're adding up everything by doing an integral. You're dividing by the length of the integral. All right, so it's just the same as if you're finding the average of your test scores or something like that. All right, but just knowing the formula, all right, because we'll kind of do this a bunch separately. It's just one extra step of doing that division at the end to find the average value.